If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey everybody, we are back, and today we're talking about the psychology of money. Timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness.
Who wrote this?
By Morgan Housel.
When did he write it?
Just recently.
Yeah, don't you love these hot off the press books?
I do.
What, 2020?
I really do. 2020. Very, very recent. And I'm curious, I'll start off with this question. Did you think it was actually about the psychology of money, or what did you think it was going to be about? Well,
I thought it was interesting that we were hunting a book in the wellness wheel, in the financial health sector. We talked to some bankers, we talked to some financial advisors. We said, hey, what book would you recommend for the general public to read about money and health? I don't know. I'm too busy. I don't read. I've got some really strange answers for these people, and I love you all if you're out there listening. But I just know from my work at 360healthforyou.com, where I help people make healthy happen, that sometimes I'll get an objection that my services and products cost too much, and money becomes a limiting factor for people to do things that might actually make their health better. I think I have observed people who are under financial stress having poor health outcomes. And so I think the burden of stress of money is right up there at the top. And they say that marriages, financial stress can break marriages apart pretty fast. So I definitely believe that the way we think about our money and how we interact with our money influences our health. So this book, The Psychology of Money, I don't think money has a psychology. It's just a piece of paper or a piece of coin. But the way we think about money I think there's a psychology behind that. Yeah, so I think this is what I thought would be in here, but I was pleasantly surprised with how easy it was to read.
Yeah, it is easy to read, and quick stories, and he emphasizes in the intro that, he wants to make it interesting enough in little short bits that you can actually finish the book, because most people don't finish books.
Yeah, and our reading habits have changed over the years.
Yeah.
We like bullets and short things. Well, Daniel Pink, he wrote, I always like to look at who else reads these books we read. Daniel Pink has written some excellent books in the business area. I have read Drive, but he says few people write about finance with the graceful clarity of Morgan Housel. And then James Clear, who we read The Atomic Habits, remember James? He says everyone should own a copy of this book. So, given how much people love James Clear and his book, put this one right beside it.
Yeah. So when we were wanting to read something on the topic of money, I was pulled in by the ratings on this book and the popularity, but also the title, the psychology part, because I thought, okay, we're health geeks and we like the science behind it. But it wasn't that much of it, as much as I was expecting. So that's kind of why I asked you that question. Is part of it was in there what I was expecting, how we think about money, and other parts it threw me in a loop.
I think it has more of a historical perspective than a scientific perspective, perhaps.
That's true.
So I think the discipline that influences his discourse is historical, and then his observations. Timeless lessons is what it's called, and it's an international bestseller. And he breaks it out in those little short stories, and I believe he said that he wrote it as wasn't he in the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, I was going to tell everybody a little bit about him. Morgan Housel is a partner at the Collaborative Fund. Previously, he was a columnist at the Wall Street Journal and the Motley Fool. He is a 2-time winner of the Best in Business Award from the Society of American Business Editors and Writers. the New York Times Sydney Award and a 2-time finalist for the Gerald Loeb Award for Distinguished Business Writing.
Yes, I think that's pretty impeccable.
And I think he works as a financial advisor, right, as well? Seems like what came across here.
Yeah, he kind of kicks it off with nobody's got the right answer. And everybody's crazy or nobody's crazy. And that this whole idea of success with money is based on survival. To survive, we have to be pretty good with our money.
Yeah, I have a note here that you can chalk up one lucky move to just that, luck. Know that it won't guarantee that you'll continue to be lucky. So he goes into like, we're not crazy, and...
Yeah, and that's because we all have our own world experience. My experience is not the same as yours. And so for me, what works for me may not work for you. It may work for you, but maybe not.
Or one way that I look at money isn't the same way that you look at money and make your decisions.
Yeah, and that's because of what you've experienced.
Yes.
According to him, he's saying the way I think the world works is based on my experience with the world.
And that's funny too, because with science, right, we predict what will happen, right? And then we can make our decisions based on what the science tells us. With money, he's saying it's really risk and luck, and you can't predict what will happen based on what has happened in the past.
Yeah, because in science you want reproducible results.
Yes.
And in this thing, you cannot discover reproducible results, because what he's saying is there are too many moving variables. And in science, you control the variables. When you do an experiment, you design it and you say, okay, I'm going to make sure that let's say human subjects are involved. They're all going to be female. They're all going to be 20 years old. They're all going to have certain income. They're all going to eat the same diet. And then I'm going to change one thing and see what happens. And then I'm going to do that again. And if I do that over and over and get the same results with that same group, okay, that's what's going to happen to that group of people. But in money, because of the moving parts, you cannot control those variables.
Exactly.
And that's what he says, forget it. Luck and risk are partners for sure. And you are, I'm reminded of working with a person. We were really excited when we had students that all passed at 100% on an exam and were able to go to work. And then another year, it wouldn't be 100%. And so this particular boss said, hey, be careful, don't take credit for that 100%. You aren't that great as a faculty. But, because next year you want to take the blame that you weren't that good, you couldn't get them done. So it all depends on who those people in the chairs are that you get when they, and teachers are stressed with this all the time in the classroom, and funding for education based on pass rates in their classrooms. And it depends on who gets in those chairs, what's their family like and what is their nutrition like. And is that controlled for? No, they're just put in there as numbers. And yet the teacher is...
Get the blame or
for the success or not. However, there are some amazing teachers who overcome some of those extreme odds. So did you want to say something else about luck? Because it does happen, but it's not often, is it?
No.
And risk is all around us.
The difficulty in identifying what is luck, what is skill, and what is risk is one of the biggest problems we face when trying to learn about the best way to manage money. Mm-hmm. I think that just sums up the risk and luck chapter.
Mm-hmm. And then the next chapter was on enough.
When rich people do crazy things.
Yeah, I can remember working with people of varying income potentials. And, you look at any corporate structure, you've got the janitor, right? And you've got the security guard, you've got the people that greet the receptionists, and you've got the managers, and you've got the CEOs in the hierarchy, and you can pretty much determine who's got the highest salary in that structure, right? Yeah. So some of those people in those higher structures would talk to some of us in the lower structures and think, what's your problem? Can't you have a nanny? No. And so that disparity is there. So the thing then is enough. Oh, well, then I need a nanny. So I don't have enough because I don't have a nanny. And so I keep striving for more and more because I compare myself to the people around me, and that's what goes on the psychology that he talks about is there's never enough, even for the people at the top, because they would say to me, I don't make enough money. It's like, what do you mean you don't make enough money? You make 5 times what I'm making. Well, it's just not enough, And so there's never enough, and that's a mindset game that some of these other books we're reading say, protect yourself from this, and that's what he's saying too.
Well, and social media makes it so much worse, right? You mentioned history. So in the past, it would be comparing to people in your company or in your town, and now it's everybody. You can see everybody's vacation that they're taking. You can see everybody's highlight reels.
Oh yeah, their perfect world.
Their perfect house that their nanny just cleaned or their housekeeper just cleaned. And so the point is that the ceiling of social comparison is so high that virtually no one will ever hit it.
Yeah, and so what he says is you've got to be very careful about the moving goalpost, because when you start your financial literacy and your desire to survive and end up with enough so that you have, he says this is the goal, you have enough to be able to do what you want to do when you want to do it, and you have that freedom. Money is a vehicle to freedom. It's not what it gets you. It's not the stuff that you end up with in, acquisition. It's that liberation that you can make a decision without someone else telling you what you have to do. And I kind of am personally aligned with that. I like that outcome. And so that moving goalpost thing is what he says you've got to be careful with. If you set up your financial planning based on a certain goalpost, and then you say, oh, no, now I'm going to move it over to here, you'll never get to where your plan might take you.
Right. So I guess goal number 1 from this book is be satisfied and know where your enough is.
Yeah.
Try not to keep moving it.
And then what he says is the risk then is a part of that story too, because you might take more risk to move that goalpost because in some investment strategies, the higher the risk, the greater the gain, but the less likely you are to get it. So you're gambling at some level. And he says some things are not worth the risk, and you have to be very clear on that before you engage in that kind of thinking. Things like family, your reputation, those are not worth losing. So if you are doing things with your money that put those things at risk, and he has these great stories about very successful people who lose everything. And the Bernie Madoff story is one of them. And there's another fellow of similar ilk where they had so much and they just threw it all away and they never recovered. I mean, their reputation,
their families,
ruined.
their lives.
They were left alone. So not a good outcome. What about compounding?
Well, this was neat because it talks about Warren Buffett's. No, is this Warren? Him?
Probably. He was good at that. He's still good at that. Yeah, the idea that if you dollar cost average and do something every day or every month regularly,
uninterrupted,
that you're going to get the reward. And the idea that once you grab onto that, it's time leveraged. It's like if you start like my grandsons, if they started when they're 5 and 10 with a saving habit on a regular, uninterrupted process, they would end up pretty well set, according to the evidence historically that you can look at. It does tend to show that works. Versus me, let's say I get a divorce, lose everything, lose my job, don't have a car, don't have a home, and I'm 40 years old and have to start over. I don't have as long to do it, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't start at that point. And that is the good part of the psychology is once you understand some of these principles, it's never too late to start. It's just better to start earlier.
Right. And he says Buffett's fortune isn't due to just being a good investor, but being a good investor since he was literally a child. So like your example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and he talked about the ice age. So as a biologist, I loved that. He was talking about it was the summers that got shorter that ended up, causing the ice age. It wasn't the winters got heavier. And you look at how many times the Earth has been encircled with ice, and it's a very slow process. It doesn't happen like that. What else? Is there anything else in that one?
No, just that it says if he didn't start investing earlier, what does it say? Effectively, all of his financial success can be tied to the base he built in pubescent years, and the longevity he maintained in his geriatric years. It says, what would be a rough estimate of his net worth be today if he didn't invest at a young age? And it says not 84.5 billion, 11.9 million, which is 99.9% less than his actual net worth.
Yeah, it's still a nice outcome, though. You know, I mean, nothing to flinch at.
Certainly.
It's like planting the oak trees. You know, you plant them, and then the harvest comes in many, many years later. The thing that we're doing here on the podcast is kind of giving you an overview of some of the hot little noogies in each of these chapters.
Yeah.
And trying to say it's spiced up with some really good stories about people. And there was a delightful story about a janitor who worked as a janitor his whole life, died, and he left some huge benevolence. And everybody was stunned. And you've never heard this guy's name, but it was one of those really sweet, pleasant surprises. His life was good. He loved his life. It wasn't that he didn't have enough. He had what he wanted, and it was enough. But he ended up being able to bless so many other people with the benevolence he left as a legacy.
That was a really good story from it. What else was good from here?
Tails you in. The idea of it's not the bell curve or the inverted U curve that's in the middle. It's the odd things that happen that you have no ability to predict that drive the whole system. And so the outliers are like, who would have thought of COVID? And look what it did to people financially. You could not anticipate that. You couldn't plan for it. But yet we're all affected by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why the steady, uninterrupted path to financial success is going to be able to tolerate that blip when it hits.
Right. And he's saying most of the time we see that and we want to take our money out and keep it safe, but to keep it in there and ride it out in the long haul, and it'll pay off.
That reactivity.
The other thing that was, so you said tails, you win, right? That we all have really terrible ideas.
Yeah.
We're all full of horrendous ideas that are often acted upon, especially if you're in finance or an entrepreneur. And it takes all of those bad ideas and trying those out to get your one good idea. And so lots of, Amazon products don't pan out, and then others are a hit. But we don't hear about the ones that don't pan out. So if we're going out to try something either financially or entrepreneurially and it fails, then we take offense to it because a lot of times we don't realize that it takes all of these attempts to get to your one.
Exactly.
And so it could take a lot of different investment strategies or ways to invest, but then there's one tail is what's bringing you success, and that's a lot of businesses and financial advisors.
And when you flip the coin, heads you win, tails you lose. Here he's saying no, tails you win, because half the time you're going to be wrong, half the time you're going to win, and you don't know which time it is, so you have to keep doing it. You have to keep flipping.
And you can't just look at each small investment. You have to look at the big picture to see how successful you are. So smart, successful people know a secret. You have to try a lot of things that may fail, may fizzle out, or just not earn you very much money, but it takes continuously attempting and efforts to find your tail. Yeah, keep flipping.
Yeah, and those of us that are professional network marketers know that very well. We know about the compounding effect too. It's the idea that you talk to one person about your wonderful help for them and they don't see it. Well, you don't quit. You don't say, oh, it must not work because they don't like it. You have to talk to some more people. You have to find the connection, find the person that needs the solution that you have to offer. And so this was really helpful for me because that's the way my business works. And my money, I like to see it work that way too. If you are fearful. And I think, reviewed a book not too long ago about unwinding anxiety. And so when these awful events happen in the markets, the financial markets, people can get very stressed and fearful and anxious. Like you said, pull money out when they should leave it in, and not diversify their portfolio, have one pick or whatever. They can then get into that psychology of, oh, I'm going to fail, and just a downward spiral. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of connection in our wellness wheel between these topics that we've been talking about. And this mindfulness, I think mindfulness would applied to the money would be really a good idea.
Absolutely. And to tie it into what you were saying at the beginning of our episode, I'm going to read a quote from him that money is more than your salary, more than the size of, or your success, right? Financial success is more than your salary, more than the size of your house, more than the prestige of your job. Control over doing what you want, when you want, with the people you want is the broadest lifestyle variability that makes people happy.
And that's what I was saying. I buy into that.
Yes, yeah.
It is that freedom that you get. And he has a definition for wealth and a definition for rich. He says rich is your current income, but wealth is hidden. It's not, it's not spent. Mm-hmm. It gives you what you just read, that opportunity to control your life.
Right, and he goes into, having that backup savings allows you to maybe leave a job, and we were just talking about this on the past episode, leave a job that doesn't feel right for mm-hmm. you. And if you have that backup savings, you can make that move, mm-hmm. and it is less scary. Or, things come up all the time, and he is building his wealth, keeping his goalpost for enough on the lower side, so that he can have just an abundance of this freedom with his wife and his child.
Yeah, sounds good.
To do what he wants, and that sounds like happiness and wellness to me.
My husband used to have a good saying, too. He'd say, do something for your future self today. Mm-hmm. And I like that idea, but what he brings up, this author, Morgan Housel, says, we're going to change. So the young person that's doing something for their future self may not know who they're going to become. And when you get to be that other person, you look back and say, why did you do that? I didn't need that. So understanding that we are very poor forecasters of our future. We mm-hmm. really don't know who we're going to become unless we get into a little more of the self-awareness practice that we've talked about in the Enneagram discussion. And that nothing's free, and that these fees and fines are an idea to think about, because a lot of people say, oh, stock market's down 10%. Well, that's just the fee for being in the market, y'all. That's what he says, and that's like that's kind of a different way to look at that. It's not like I lost money. It's just what it costs you to play this game. And that's a mindset. I think just like the rich and wealth is a mindset thing. The language, the words we use to talk to ourselves about stuff are really powerful.
Absolutely. I recommend this book. I thought it was an easy read. It was lots of little mindset lessons, good stories.
I love this book, and I was surprised. It was a very easy read, but I thought it's something that, like I said, I do believe people ought to own a copy of this, because we don't, in our education journey, get much opportunity as individuals to address financial health. And it is very much part of how we feel happy, engaged, and able to relate to people and do things and participate. That's the other thing. Can you afford to have lunch with your friends? And if you do, does it bust your financial plan? Are you strong enough to say, no, I can't have lunch, let's have coffee? Those kinds of things are at the beginning are important. And it's the same principle. It's not what I want. I don't want to be spending my money that way just because you are. Because your world experience is different than mine. And it is important for you, and that's good. But it's not important for me.
And we want to avoid that comparison, right?
And
be strong enough to say, mm-hmm. well, that's good for you. That's not my worldview.
And that's that boundaries thing, and that's also that self-awareness thing.
It goes back to all the books.
I know. So that's why this wellness wheel really is an integrated thing. It's not just this little piece and that little piece. It's the whole 360, which I call my business 360 Health. And we're making healthy happen at 360health4u.com. And I'm Eleanor.
You did there.
That was good.
Hey, Tim, you've been awful quiet. Awful quiet.
Awful quiet.
You've been over there reading books.
Yeah, I've been reading something. Yes.
Well, I am Kristen Norton, one of the registered dietitians at Well Balanced Nutrition. I invite you to come visit our website, get connected with us, maybe book a clarity call and see if we're a good fit to work together, or just come hang out. We'd love to have you there in our community.
And check out what we're reading next and give us your ideas.
Views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.